what a company might do if it wished to increase its profit, right? Now, first of all, what you will do in this question is fairly simple. You will define profit, right? So what is profit? Profit is difference between revenue and cost, right? So profit is the amount a company saves from its revenue after paying or of its expenses, right? Is making sense, right? So what are the expenses for a company, right? So revenue is basically the receipt from the sale of your products, right? So if a company is producing any services or if a company is producing any products, so what's the total amount of revenue it generated would be equal to the amount of cash it received. The amount of cash the company received from the sale of its goods, that's its revenue, right? That is its revenue. Now, what's the cost? Cost is basically the expenses the company faced in producing those products, right? The raw material expense, the packaging expense, the transportation expense, the marketing expense, and all those other expenses, that is its total expenses of cost, right? So what you save at the end of the day, that is its profit. Now, how can a company maximize its profit? That is what the question is asking you to tell. Maximize the profits, right? So what would you write in this question? How can a company maximize its profit, right? So the idea is fairly simple. If a company wants to maximize its profit, it has to do two things, right? We're going to talk about productive and allocative efficiency. You will talk about productive efficiency. In fact, that's directly related to this question, but allocative efficiency is not directly related to this question. I'll explain you how, right? So think about this, Abdullah. Productive efficiency is right, exactly. Productive efficiency, as you rightly said, that's about producing at the lowest possible cost. So when you produce at the lowest possible cost, that is productively efficient, right? So that is what you will talk about in this question, but you will not talk about allocative efficiency, right? So students, think about this. Fatma, this is the question we are going. Quickly read the question and then we get started. So the question says, there are often reports in the press that company profits have not risen as much as in previous years. As a result, the company receives adverse criticism. Explain what a company might do if it wished to try to increase its profit. So if a company is trying to increase its profits, what should the company do, right? So the first thing that you have to do in this question, you have to define what profit is, right? So profit is, simply speaking, the amount that a company saves after paying its cost. So the amount of revenue that a company saves after paying its cost, that is its profit, right? Okay, then you have to jump to the second part of the question, which is how to maximize profit, right? How will a company maximize its profit? So we were talking about that exactly. Now, how can a company maximize its profit? So it has to do one of the two things, right? Maximize revenue. Right? On one hand, they have to maximize their revenue, and on the other hand, they have to minimize their cost. Right? So these are the two things that a company needs to do to maximize its profit. Firstly, to maximize its revenue. Secondly, to minimize its cost. Easy? Good on this? Okay. Now, after we have mentioned this, then what you'll do next, right? Maximizing requires a company to evaluate the nature of its product, and then by estimating the product's PET, the company can set its prices such that they maximize the revenue. Okay, now students, think about this. We have so far told the examiner, right, what is profit, and secondly, we have also mentioned that to maximize your profit, you have to do two things. Either you need to maximize your revenue, or you need to minimize your cost. So these are the two things that you need to do. Okay. After we have mentioned this, now we are coming and talking, now we're moving forward and we're talking about how is revenue maximized. So for maximizing revenue, what you need to do, as I'm saying over here, is that the producer needs to understand the nature of its good. Now, why is it important to understand the nature of the good? Because whatever pricing policy you need to choose will be dependent on the nature of the good you are producing, right? Yes or no? So have a look at this. Maximizing revenue requires a company to evaluate the nature of its product. Oh, right. So, right. Maximizing revenue requires a company to value the nature of its product. And then by estimating the product's PEV, the company can set prices such that they maximize the revenue. For instance, what did we talk about in AS? Right. If product's demand is inelastic, what will you do to the prices? Then producer can set high prices, which will help in increasing total revenue. Yes or no? Right. So if you remember what happens in the case of less elastic or inelastic products. So when there's an inelastic good and producers increase the price, that increases the total revenue of the good. That increases the total revenue of the good. Yes or no? Right. On the other hand, when the demand for a product is more elastic, when the demand for a good is more elastic, what you need to do, you need to reduce price to increase total revenue. You need to reduce price to increase total revenue. Is this making sense or not? Right. So these are the two things that you will, right? These are the two things that you can mention over it. Then moving forward, right? For cost minimization, a firm needs to be productively efficient. What we were talking about here, right? Yes or no, right? So we do know what productive efficiency is. If not, I'll explain you right over here. That will help you understand what productive efficiency is, right? So for cost minimization, a firm needs to be productively efficient. Productive efficiency is when a business uses its output at the lowest possible average cost, right? So when a firm is producing its products at the lowest possible average cost, that is productively efficient. Yes or no? So how do we show productive efficiency on a graph? Students, do you remember? Remember, we looked at the graph for allocative and productive efficiency, right? And in that, we saw that productive efficiency is when you're producing on the lowest possible ADC curve, right? So when a company produces on the lowest possible ADC curve, that's productively efficient. Let's have a look at this, right? So what you will do first of all, you'll draw a simple normal graph, right? With the y and the x-axis, right? On the y-axis of the graph, you will have ATC, which is basically the average total cost of producing a certain product, right? And on the x-axis, you will have quantity of output. On the x-axis, what will you have, right? You will have quantity of output or the quantity of the good that's being. Just give me a second, right? On the x-axis, you will have the output of the good, right? You will have on the x-axis, you will have the output, right? Okay, now think about this. The shape of the PPC curve, is U-shaped, yes or no? It's a U-shaped graph. It's a U-shaped graph that shows that the cost will initially decrease, and then it will go up, then it will increase. Yes or no? Well, is it making sense? But if this is ATC 1, right, there could be other possible ADC curves which could be lower than this one, right? So there could be other possible ADC curves, right, like this, right? So this is another ATC curve, which is lower than this, right? So let's label it as ATC 2, right? And since ATC 2 is lower than ATC 1, so ATC 2 is more efficient than ATC 1. This is making sense, students? Okay, I can tell you definitely. So for this question, are we gonna in depth about X efficiency and technical efficiency? I mean, not really. This is not directly related to this question, Abdullah, but I'll tell you how much do you need to write in this question. Fatma, are you getting this? Okay. Now the question Abdullah is asking is that why are there multiple ATC curves? Why are there multiple ATC curves on a graph, right? So if you remember, I did tell you just like that, there could be an unlimited amount of indifference curves. Similarly, students, there could be unlimited amount of ADC curves, right? Yes or no? So think about this. Why is that the case? Now, the idea is simple, Abdullah, right? So the idea is that depending upon how much, sorry about that, depending upon how much, how much efficiently you are producing, Abdullah, depending upon how much efficiently you are producing, that will determine where your ATC will be, right? Now think about this. I'll tell you, you take business studies, right? Let me give you an example. Have you heard that concept of lean production? Now, what is lean production? Lean production is basically when a business uses production techniques that minimize its cost of production, right? So there are a couple of different things that you do in lean production, right? You use just-in-time inventory management system. You look for inefficient processes. You try to make those processes more efficient, and all these small steps that help you increase your efficiency, right? So that is basically how exactly, that is how a company would move from a higher indifference curve, Abdullah. This is how a company moves when a company constantly implements new and more efficient methods and processes. That's how a company moves from higher cost to lower cost curves, right? And that's why, I mean, cost curve is just showing you how much will be your expected cost, right? So this graph ADC curves are just showing you how much possible cost, how much cost a business would incur. So if it's more efficient, it will operate on a lower ADC curve like ADC 3. If it's less efficient, it will operate on a higher ADC curve like ADC 2, and so on. Easy? Are we good on this? Any confusion so far, students? Any confusion, anything that's not clear? We good? Okay, now moving on. Great, perfect, right? Now, moving on, what we have told the examiner so far. So we've talked about what profit is. We have talked about that to maximize your profit, you need to maximize your revenue and you need to minimize your cost, right? Then after that, we talked about how do you maximize your revenue? I told you that it's the pricing policy, it's the pricing strategy that will help you maximize your revenue. How so? So depending upon the PED of the good, so if the PED is inelastic, you charge higher price, right? And that will result in higher revenue. On the other hand, if the PED of a product is more elastic, then you reduce your price, and as a result, you get more revenue, right? So that's the first thing that you need to know. Secondly, what you need to talk about is how a business can minimize its cost, right? So for cost minimization, what a business should do is that it should implement all processes that are more efficient, right? So then also you can explain on this productive efficiency achieved by introducing new technology, methods, and processes that eliminate unnecessary and inefficient process, and therefore helping the business achieve higher efficiency, right? So the idea is really simple, students. Right? So the idea is fairly simple, right? What's the idea? Productive efficiency is achieved by introducing new technology, methods, and processes that eliminate unnecessary and inefficient processes, and therefore helping the business achieve higher efficiency, right? So example, if you want to talk about real life examples, for instance, use of just in time, right? So what is just in time? Just in time approach, right? As opposed to conventional inventory management. Fatma, do you understand these terms that we are writing over here? Inventory management systems reduce business fixed cost as it does not spend a lot on warehouse, and therefore it would overall decrease the business average total cost. Is it making sense, students? Right? So the idea is fairly simple that when business implements new and efficient methods, like just-in-time is one simple approach, right? Now, what happens in just-in-time approach, right? So instead of holding your inventory, right, like instead of having a warehouse where you store all your inventory, like raw material, finished goods, and all those, right? What you do instead is that you just order your inventory when you need it, right? So you order your raw material when you need it, and that arrives just in time, right? So with that thing happening, what it saves you, it saves you fixed cost. Why? Because you don't need to build a big warehouse. You don't need to pay the rent. You don't need to get other don't need to get other equipment in the warehouse and all that, right? And that, when that reduces your fixed cost, obviously total cost is made up of fixed cost and variable cost. So when your total cost decreases because of that, your average total cost would also decrease, right? Students, are you getting? So if anything is confusing about how these different cost components are connected, or yeah, so you have to ask me there and then, right? Now, students, the idea is fairly simple. So the total cost is what? The total cost of a business is sum of fixed cost and variable cost, right? So the total cost of a business, right? So total cost of a business, right? Just a second, right? So your total cost is sum of total cost is sum of fixed cost and variable cost. Is this correct? Right? Now, if your fixed cost is decreasing, right, for any reason, like for the example that I gave you, your total cost would decrease. And when your total cost would decrease, then that cost would be divided over a number like your output to get your average cost, right? Now, how do you calculate your average cost? So your average cost, the business average cost, is simply, so your average cost for a business is equal to, so the average cost of a business is equals to total cost divided by output. Total cost divided by output. Easy. So that is what it is, right? Okay. Now, this being said, Ray, plus, it's plus, Abdullah, fixed cost plus variable cost is your total cost. And then when you divide the total cost with the output as to how much the business is producing, that will give you the average total cost, right? Easy. We good on this, right? Can you move on? Okay. Now, after you have explained all of this, now you have given the examiner an overall perspective of how a business maximizes its profits, right? That's what the question was asking you to say. Explain what a company might do if it wishes to increase its profit. So you have to do what? You have to increase your revenue. You have to minimize your cost. How do you increase your revenue? We have given specific examples. We have given specific strategies as to how a business will maximize its revenue. And on the other hand, regarding the cost, we have again given specific points as to how a company can reduce its cost. Yes or no? Easy. We got on this? Okay. Now coming to the B part, students, discuss what alternate objectives a company might have apart from profit maximization. Now we do know it's kind of very much linked to what we were doing yesterday, so we'll not spend a lot of time. If you remember, we talked about other business objectives. So apart from profit maximization, a business is looking for other objectives as well, which includes what? Which includes your, right, which includes market share, right? Higher market share, brand loyalty, right? I explained you what brand loyalty is. So brand loyalty is when a customer only purchases your brand. So when they go to shop and they ask for Coke and the shopkeeper says that we don't have Coke, we are out of stock, we only have Pepsi. So the person doesn't purchase Pepsi. and instead go to another shop and buy Coke only, right? So that's what brand loyalty is, right? So market share, brand loyalty. Are we going to talk about sales maximization? Exactly, right. Unique selling points, very good. Exactly, all of these things, Abdullah. So unique selling point is when a business, creates, unmatched or a unique selling point is any unique characteristic of a product, of your brand, which is not present in your competitors' brands or products, right? So by creating unique selling points, what you're doing, you're making your product demand more inelastic, right? Because customers know that it's only your product that has such characteristics. So for instance, let me give you an example so that you can better relate to it. So if you think about Mega Lecture, so Mega Lecture is not the only online teaching platform. There are a couple of other online teaching platforms as well. But our unique selling point might be that we provide very personalized, tutoring and coaching to our students, which means that we help them where they need the help and so on and so forth, right? So that shows that customers would be more happy to join Mega Lecture as opposed to any other teaching platform. Yes or no, right? So unique selling point is one. Then sales maximization, right? So sales maximization is another important objective that businesses wish to achieve. And what happens actually is that instead of you trying to maximize profit, we're just trying to maximize your sales, like getting more customers on board and selling more worth of goods, right? Because that would make your brand more recognized, more popular, and eventually with that thing happening, what will it do? That will eventually, not in the short run but in the long run, that will help you earn more profit and so on, right? So these are all the things that you need to talk about in this question. um, will selling share of your company be an objective? No, 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 no. So think about this, Abdullah. The idea is that here we are talking about how business objectives need to be set, right? So what you are talking about is like share of a company. Shares are a different thing altogether, right? So share prices increase when a business is doing good, right? So market price, look at this, of a company's share is basically the representation, basically the market price of a company's share is basically a measure of how well a company is doing. For instance, if a company has become more profitable or is expected, even if the company is expected to be more profitable in the future, then the share price will increase, vice versa, right? So that's the idea, right? Is this making sense? Right? So share price of a company is representation of how well a company is doing, right? So if a company is expected to become more profitable in the future, or if it has already become more profitable because of some of its, some of its good performance, right? Recently, it has been performing well and the company has made more profits than usual. Then investors would want to buy shares of your company because they know that your company shares will be more valuable in the long run, right? So think about this. When Apple introduces something new or Apple launches a new product, similarly for Microsoft, Facebook, and so on, right? So people start expecting that their share price will go up. So all people buy the shares there and then, and that results in higher price of the share. Abdullah and Fatma, are you getting it, right? So that's how share price is an indication of how well the company is doing financially, right? If it's doing well, the share price will increase, and vice versa. If it's not doing that well, the share price will decrease and all that, right? We good? Okay, so students, if this is good, then move to another question here, right? We talked about this question yesterday, discussed the similarities and differences between a firm's behavior in perfect competition and oligopoly. We talked about the characteristics of both the market structures. We said first what perfect competition is, what are its characteristics. We talked about the characteristics of oligopoly then, and then we compared that what are the similarities and differences in perfect competition and oligopoly. Easy? We good on this, students? Is everything clear? Right? Okay. Okay. Now, students, there's another interesting question. Can you see my screen? The question here says, Gillette, the world's largest razor maker, announced in August 2003 that its annual profits have risen by 15%. In the same period, its sales increased by 11% as there was increased demand for Sensor 3 and Mach 3 turbo razors and a reduction in the price of Duracell batteries which Gillette produces. However, Gillette faces strong competition from Energizer Holdings, which sells batteries and Sachik razors. Energizers produced a new 4-blade razor in September 2002 and increased its advertising and product promotion. Gillette lost US market share and announced it planned to increase expenditure on marketing. Explain how firms are said to behave in oligopolistic market and discuss how far this is supported by the above statement. Right? Right. Okay. Fatma, for sure. That's a very important, component of our exam, and we should obviously practice decent number of data responses as well. So not today, but tomorrow, I promise we can do a full-fledged data response question in our class, right? And then I can give you one question as a homework. You can do it on your own, and then we'll spend a couple of next few classes on doing the data response questions. I think that's a good idea. Yeah, we should definitely. Okay, now students, did you get the question? Now think about this. Sometimes the essay questions, sometimes, as you can see in this question, sometimes essay questions come with certain, context, right? So they come with certain passage that gives some, explanation as to what is happening in the market. And then based on that information, they ask you a question, right? Now, this is exactly what's happening in this case, right? Will be the main points to focus on, right? Right, exactly. Abdullah, so you're saying interdependence, collusion between collusion, price discrimination, price war, cartel. Exactly, right? Absolutely correct, right? Now the question here, what this question says, what this passage is talking about, that there are two big companies, right? Gillette and Energizer, right? Gillette and Energizer. So Gillette and Energizer are competitors because they both produce similar products. So they both are producing razor, like shaving razors that men use, and batteries, normal batteries that we use in accessories, right? And so on, right? Now, what's happening that these companies are aggressively competing among themselves. You know what aggressive competition is? So these companies are aggressively competing among themselves that, they are spending more on marketing, advertisement to attract more customers and all those things, right? Now, the question is asking you that explain how firms are said to behave in oligopolistic markets and discuss how far this is supported by the above statement, right? So first of all, student would be expected to talk about oligopolistic markets, right? So first of all, a student would be expected to talk about oligopolistic markets, right? Now, what are oligopoly markets? So basically, right, there are certain characteristics which are true in case of oligopoly markets, and that's what you need to mention in this case. So for instance, you will say that there are few firms, right? We did talk about oligopoly markets, characteristics of oligopoly market in the last, in one of the previous classes. And if you don't remember, I can just do a quick recap. So in oligopoly markets, there are few firms. Each firm has a high market share, right? And the firms in those markets are very likely to collude, right? So collusion is a very likely outcome of oligopoly markets. Now, what is collusion? So I did tell you collusion is when firms form an agreement that they will collectively set prices and output, right? This way, firms in oligopoly markets form a monopoly and therefore, right, uh, right, and therefore it gives them complete control over the market, right? Now think about this. What happens in a normal market? First, try to understand this. What happens in a normal market that there is competition? Why is there competition? Because there are multiple firms, right? So when there are multiple firms competing with each other, what happens, right? So they try to get more and more sales, and to get more and more sales, what you need to do? You need to attract more customers. You need to attract more customers. To attract more customers, what you need to do is that you will want to give them lower prices. You would want to charge customers lower prices. Yes or no? And you would want to produce high quality goods. Is this correct? Right? But in oligopoly, what these companies do
YouTube
instead,
पे रिव्यू देखो S10 Plus का, उसका कैमरा वगैरह देखो.
you are
क्या?
you're not mute, Abdullah. Okay. Now, what happens in the case of normal markets that they are behaving competitive, right? They are competing with each other. What we mean when we say that they are competing with each other, that they try to get more customers. And to get more customers, what you need to offer best deals. How do you offer best deals? So either you improve the quality of your goods or you reduce the price of your products and things like that, right? Now, in oligopoly markets, instead, what you do is that you eliminate this competition. And how do you eliminate the competition? By forming an agreement, by forming a collusion, a cartel, as we say, right? Now, the cartel is when all these firms collectively decide to set their prices, right? Abdullah, just make sure you're mute, right? So cartel is when these companies collectively decide to set their prices, right? So that they don't have to compete with each other again, right? And that gives them a monopoly power. And what is monopoly power? Monopoly power is when there's a single firm in the market and that gets to control everything, right? So that's one very common characteristic of oligopoly, right? Now, first thing that you will say after explaining what collusion is, you will say that what you'll say here is that as per the information in the passage, right, firms are not colluding as it is evident that they are aggressively competing with each other. Do you agree with me or not, right? So based on the information in the passage, you can clearly tell that the two firms are not colluding. They are not setting their prices together. They're not controlling the output in the market. Instead, they're aggressively competing with each other, right? Because each company is trying to attract more customers, trying to offer them low prices and all that, right? Yes or no, right? So that's not supporting the fact that the firms are oligopoly, right? Secondly, another thing that you need to say is that firms in oligopoly markets have kinked demand curve, right? Now, what do we mean by kinked demand curve? Firms in oligopoly markets have kinked demand curve. Now, let me show you how the kinked demand curves look like. So the kinked demand curve, students, have a look at this. It looks like this, right? So the kinked demand curve looks like this. I'll show you, right? So there is a bend in the demand curve. And why is there a bend in the demand curve? I'll tell you what it is and what it shows, right? So students, have a look at this, right? So the demand curve in oligopoly markets look like this, right? So this is how the demand curve looks like, right? There's a bend. Now, what is this bend showing us, right? Have a look at this, right? So there's a bend in the demand curve, and the name of this demand curve is kinked, right? The name of the demand curve is kinked demand curve, right? Okay, now this is only, present, this kinked demand curve is only in the oligopoly markets, not in any other market, right? So first thing that you need to remember, right? Now this kink here shows that there is price rigidity. Now, what do we mean when we say price rigidity? So price rigidity, students, basically means that the price is stuck at a certain level. Now, price rigidity means that the price will stay stuck at this level. Why? So I'll tell you, right? Now, there are two options available to a company in any market, right? So either that company can increase the price of its products, or the company can reduce the price of its goods, right? Now, if it wants to increase the price of its products, the problem is, or the challenge is, that it's afraid that other players will not increase the price. You have to listen to me carefully, right? Now, in oligopoly markets, without collusion, we're talking about. What are we talking about? We're talking about what happens in the case of without collusion, right? So without collusion, the two possibilities available to a firm in oligopoly market are either to increase the price or to decrease the price. Now, the problem with increasing prices, that if you increase your price, you fear that your competitors will not increase the price. If your competitors don't increase the price, then what happens, right? That means that you will lose your customers to your competitors. If you don't increase your price, you'll lose your customers to your competitors, right? So that's one big fear here. The second possibility is to decrease the price. Now, the problem with decreasing the price is that if you decrease your price, your competitors will also decrease the price, and that could result in a price war. That could result in a price war, right? So without collusion, listen to this one more time. Without collusion, the two options available to a company are either to increase price or to decrease price. Increasing the price, the problem is you fear that your competitors will not follow you, right? Because obviously, why would they want to join in? And they keep their prices low. And when they keep their prices low, your customers move to switch to your competitors' products. Why? Because those are relatively cheaper. So that's one problem. The second problem is if you reduce your price, what happens then? If you're reducing your price, then that can result in price wars. What are price wars? So you reduce your price, your competitor will also reduce the price, and in the process, you both the companies are negatively affected. Their profits are decreased because you are doing a price war. Yes or no? Characteristic of market is price rigidity, right? Without collusion, have two options, namely to increase the price or to reduce the price. Increasing the price, fear is that the competitors will not follow, and therefore the company will lose its customers to its competitors. This is making sense? On the other hand, if a company decides to reduce its price, then it fears to start a price war in which each firm is trying to offer the most competitive price, and in the process, all companies are negatively, all companies experience decrease in their profits. Is this making sense? Students, is it making sense, right? Now, the problem is, as I've explained you, another very common characteristic of oligopoly markets is that they have price rigidity. Why is there price rigidity? So price rigidity is shown through this demand curve known as kink demand curve, right? Now, what happens in this case, as I told you, that the price stays rigid around this level, right? So there's a kink in the demand curve. Where there's a kink, the price is rigid around that level. Why is price rigid? So either you can increase the price, the company can either increase the price or reduce the price. Now the fear is if you increase the price, your competitors will not follow that, and therefore you will lose your customers to your competitors. That's one problem. On the other hand, if you want to reduce the price, then the fear is that it will start a price war. You reduce your price, your competitor will reduce the price, and you both are trying to stay competitive. And in the process, you are negatively affected because of reduced profits, right? So since this is a major problem for oligopoly firms, so what they do to solve this problem, that they form a cartel. They form a cartel or a collusion where what they do actually is that they make an agreement, and as per that agreement, they both decide to collectively increase the price. Now that fear is gone, right? So when you have made a collusion agreement, then you can collectively increase the price of your goods, and in the process, you both charge higher prices from your customers and therefore make more profit. So that's how collusion is beneficial for the oligopoly firms. But a point for this argument can be increase in quality and brand loyalty. For what, Abdullah? You're saying that when companies collude, that gets them better quality and brand loyalty? I mean, can be, yeah, correct. But since there is this price rigidity, that's why companies fear, and that's why they form a collusion. That's how it happens, right? Okay, so students, will stop here for today. Tomorrow we'll continue from here. So, right, we'll continue with this question and tell you more about it. And we'll also do a case study question, full-fledged case study question. Right? Okay. See you then. Take care. Have a good night. See you tomorrow. Allah Hafiz.